It's 4 o'clock on a Monday, and you know what that means, don't you? It's time for another exciting episode of Taxi TV Live. This week, starring very special guest star, Mr. Martin Tichy. Yeah, baby. Woo! And thank you, fake band. Thank you, fake audience. Hello, real guest.
Hi.
How are you, Martin?
Very nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, I'm excited. Well, you guys have already read the email, many of you, not all of you. So I want to give you a little backstory. Oh, I forgot about this. And I've got two screens open today, so I can't bring the chat all the way up. So it was almost exactly a year ago. It was right before the road rally last year. I was sitting in the office, I think probably like on a Sunday night, working at like, I don't know, 9, 10 o'clock or something. And for some reason, I was going through music for something. I can't remember what. And I came across a piece called Across the Valley by Martin Tichy, Exhibit A, right here next to me. And I hit the play button. I was listening to it pretty loudly on the stereo, which you guys know so well with my NS10s behind me. And I'm listening to this thing going, holy crap, this is really, really, really good. And the more I listened, the more the hair on my arm started standing up. And by the end of it, I was literally wiping tears from my eyes. Martin would prefer that I probably say, because the piece is so emotional, but it's actually a big anthemic piece, kind of almost Pirates of the Caribbean-ish to some extent. But the reason that I got all choked up was the quality of his work, and I was just so proud of him, even though I didn't know him. He was like nobody. He was a name on a, on a file on my computer, and I was listening to this thing going, wow. Our members blow me away. This guy's so talented. Oh, look at that. He's got a phone number here in LA. So I called him and I said, Martin, this is Michael Lasko from Taxi. And there was a really long pregnant pause. He goes, okay, well, thank you. Why are you calling me or something? He was really shocked that I called him. And I said, look, I'm just calling to tell you that I think you're amazingly talented and that this piece is quite amazing. And so we started chatting, and eventually, well, I played it at the Road Rally. For those of you who were there last year, played it twice, I think, at the Road Rally in the Grand Ballroom, and
Yep.
People were like, wow, that sounds amazing. Well, and I will let him talk eventually, I promise. But there are a few reasons, at least a couple I could think of right off the top of my head, that it sounds so amazing. But you know what? Maybe I should just play it first. Let's do that. And I've got a special treat for you guys. I actually figured out a way to play it through the software, but it's a little hard to control, so I can't absolutely guarantee that this is going to start right on the beat. But we're going to find out. So hopefully it will, and this is Across the Valley by Mr. Martin Tichy. Please work, please work. No. Yeah. All right, so I've got to tell you guys, it was really hard to make that work, by the way, so don't expect it very often. There are no controls for stop and start. The only way I could stop it and start it was by changing the source of the video. Anyway, so I will admit that I was doing air conducting on like the 10th play that night, sitting here in my office. I was embarrassed and there was nobody here to see it. I was still embarrassed, but it was just, that piece is so incredibly powerful. So now, why is Martin so good? Could it be that his grandfather, is your grandfather still alive?
No.
Okay, well, sorry to hear that, but he was a violin teacher. Not only was he a violin teacher, but he was a violin teacher in Austria. So you grew up, from how old have you been playing?
Well, I started, or rather I have to say, I had to start playing the violin at the age of 5.
Yeah. Well, that's not so early. I would have started you out at, like, you know, as soon as you could stand upright, but okay.
And my mom was a pianist. And,
wow.
And so I grew up in a very classical environment.
Did you ever listen to any rock and roll as a kid? Did they in the house ever listen to like the Beatles or anything?
No,
nothing.
No.
Wow.
Not until the age of 10, when I got my first radio clock. You know, that really old in the 80s. That,
yes, with the cards that flip over with the numbers. Like click.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And that was more or less the first time I really got in contact with pop music.
Wow. Was your mind like exploding when that happened?
No. It was.
What is trash?
No, not at all. It was just okay. I mean, you hear the music everywhere when you grow up, but just at home, I didn't really listen. Had a chance to really listen to it. So and then that's when I started to get in. Of course, then I liked it. I loved classical music all the time, but in addition to that, I got interested in everything else.
I'm guessing you were a big like ABBA fan.
I was actually. You got me here. That was the very first group that I really was a fan of.
Wow, I'm still a fan. It's a guilty
of course,
pleasure.
I still am. Yeah.
That's funny.
ABBA and the Bee Gees. That was it at that time.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if I ever told you, but I actually knew the Bee Gees.
Yeah, I knew one of them. Yeah. I met one of them. Yeah.
Okay, so you started playing at 5 years old, and I remember from last time we went out to dinner, you've actually played like soloed in a big deal concert situation, right? Wasn't there something?
That was just last year in Vienna.
Right. Yeah. I didn't think you did it at 6 years old, right? So he grew up in Vienna. He came here. He started his own marketing company, as you read in the email, and eventually ended up marketing Vienna Symphonic Library, VSL, as many of you know, and kind of combined, your skill sets from a couple of things to have kind of this wonderful job. But you still play. I mean, first of all, you should know that all the solo fiddle work on that was all Martin, and everything else in there was all sampled in virtual.
Right.
That to me is mind blowing. That piece, to me, is so incredibly convincing. The night that I first heard it, I just kept listening over and over, going, "Is it live or is it Memorex?" I could not tell how much of it was sampled and how much of it was human. I could tell that the solo was human. That much I knew. Anyway, I think I even asked you that on the phone that night for reassurance. I said something like, "Was that you soloing?" So what is it about classical music that, let me rephrase that question. Is it torture for you? Let me ask it this way. Is it really hard for you working with VSL that when they've got a new product coming out and they've got a new library, and I'm guessing that you hear it, some months before the public is aware of it?
A little bit.
Yeah. Does that blow your mind? Like, wow, I can't believe they've taken it to another level?
Well, yeah, sometimes that happens. Sometimes, of course, we're working with the developers, so we kind of know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've been doing this for almost 18 years now. So that's a constant process of improving and bringing out new technologies and new software applications and new samples. And well, yeah, this has been going on since the early 2000s.
So even though your world is primarily classical, you've also done rock. Martin took a detour, and tell them what instrument you played, which is about as far away from violin as
at the age of like 15 or 16 or so. I played the drums for a few years, and it was a lot of fun, and really, you know, really rock it hard, kind of. And in
a rock band and a country band, right?
No, that was rock. That was just all, you know, teens getting together and playing all kinds of rock and whatever.
Right.
But after a few years, I really wanted to do this professionally. But after a few years, I realized, well, I am a pretty good violin player, and it would take me quite a long time and energy and practicing to get to a level of playing drums that I would really could be good at or be comfortable with. So why don't you go back to your original instrument? And then I started practicing really hard, and then of course then I got into country music
as a fiddle player.
As a fiddle player, then I did at that time I did a lot of with the electric violin with avant-garde rock, really far out.
Did you have like a big silver sequined cape and the whole deal?
No, but I had a lot of gear and amps and, you know.
Did you ever do looping with it? Like
I did looping,
awesome.
And everything, all the sounds and with effect pedals and like guitar pedals and everything. And then somehow I got a call from someone who played in a country band, and I said, no, I'm not sure. And you need to know that a country and bluegrass has quite an audience in Europe, especially in Germany, Austria, Hungary, Poland, northern Italy, so Switzerland. They really do a lot of country. It's just a scene that is a little bit, it's a closed scene. If you're not interested in country music in Austria, you don't know much about that scene.
Do they have like a country radio station?
No, they don't have a station, maybe on the internet right now, but at that time there was nothing. There was 3 radio stations in Austria at all.
and do they have like country nightclubs where people do line dancing and stuff?
They do line dance, they have fairs, they have, there is an Austria Country Music Federation that gives away awards. It's small, it's nice, it's all a little family, but...
So how was it being a country? It's funny because you hear, you know, a piece like Across the Valley, and you don't think of this guy as a fiddle player. Although back in the day when I recorded, you know, orchestras on occasion, some of the best fiddle players, some of the best violin players called themselves fiddle players. So the skill set of being a classical musician versus an electric violinist or a bluegrass violinist, you know, which one's harder? Which one requires a higher skill set?
I think, well, the higher skill set is always practicing classical violin playing, because that's real. And I'm not a good classical player at all. There's so much technique involved.
I can tell you suck, but
there's a lot of editing in the software. But the thing is, I always like to improvise.
Yeah.
And I always, in a little bit of jazz and rock and all that, and with, for example, bluegrass, this high-speed music, then the classical technique comes in handy.
Okay.
But when you have also a background in rock or pop or whatever and groovy music, then you kind of bring it together. And some people can do one thing good, the other thing not so well. Some people who really, at least that changes now. When I grew up, a lot of classical musicians tried to play jazz or blues or whatever, and that really didn't work.
Interesting.
In the meantime, I hear a lot of young guys coming out of Vienna, fully trained, experienced classical musicians, and they can do everything. So that really, there's a change in culture, or maybe also in culture in education in Austria.
Probably the internet exposing them to a wider range of stuff.
Yeah,
if you only had 3 radio stations back in the day, and now they've got unlimited resources.
Right.
That's cool. Good to know. So Martin mentioned Vienna, and I want to actually give a little tip of the hat to his wife, Claudia, who Martin showed up today. Hopefully I can do this without spilling. The plate is actually a little bit crazy looking, so it's hard to see. But that is authentic Austrian strudel that Claudia made and sent over. So Martin and I are going to enjoy a little strudel during the show today. and you guys aren't. That's really good. Wow. And the staff, I actually put it in the kitchen so the staff could enjoy it. And they were all very impressed that Claudia put rose petals all over the plate.
They're from the garden, yeah.
Remind me to send you home with the plate. Because we will steal the plate. We're known to be plate stealers. Wow. All right. Show's going on hold for me because I'm chewing. That's for you, Claudia.
That's for Claudia.
That's really good. Okay, so I'm looking at my notes, sorry. All right, so one of the main reasons that I wanted Martin on the show today is that for years now, as Taxi has progressed into doing a lot of film and TV music, and more of our members are doing orchestral stuff, and they're using sample libraries of virtual instruments. And we hear a lot of stuff where it's like, okay, somebody went out and spent $500 or $1,000 on a really nice library. Doesn't sound very good. And I've come to learn from some of our more experienced members that you could have a rather inexpensive string library or orchestral library and make it sound really good if you know what you're doing. And then there's the question of, well, what does that mean if you know what you're doing? So Martin is a guy who not only has it in his hands, but grew up immersed in classical music and understands what each component of the orchestra should sound like, which I've come to learn is the real secret to taking maybe an inexpensive library and making great sounding, executing great sounding music with it. So I asked Martin today to bring some stuff that's kind of before and after, 30-second snippets of some samples with or without articulations and dynamics and stuff, and then afterwards. So what are you guys talking about? Spiked water? You're talking about drinking again. Do you guys ever watch a show and not drink? Ever? But something that I want to talk about is tell them about where the stuff gets recorded now. Tell them about Synchron.
Okay. So I start with where we recorded the last like 17 years or 15 years. So we had a place built, and that's important to know because it's a huge difference to what we're doing now. Also in terms of library, the products that we're releasing. So we recorded Vienna Symphonic Library in a place that we specifically built for recording orchestral samples. Okay. And it's a rather dry environment. So that the samples are recorded dead center stereo and rather with 0.8 seconds ambience. Okay, so that you can, with the samples recorded center stereo, so you can take them and place them everywhere in the stereo field and with the reverberation that you want to achieve. So
and it's using, I'm guessing, digital reverb at that point?
Of course, you're using convolution reverb or algorithmic reverb.
Okay.
So that's why it's a very flexible library, and you can do anything with, from really dry environments, hybrid production from electronics, hip hop, to the real Hollywood big sound.
And this is
churches, whatever.
For all instruments. This would
for
be
everything,
for
yes.
pianos, and there would be several pianos, not just one piano, but maybe 4 or 5 different pianos.
2 pianos, several string ensembles from solo violins to chamber ensembles, orchestral size, large sizes, appassionato strings, several variations of brass, ensembles, solo instrument, everything. So it's really, and
woodwinds, percussion, and I'm going to show you pictures of a percussion setup that will blow your minds in a moment.
Okay. So and that's what we've done for the first like 15 years.
Okay.
And then Vienna Symphonic Library, the company, acquired a scoring stage, a huge building in Vienna that was originally built in the 1940s for recording film orchestras.
Okay.
And we renovated this and reopened that in 2016. And we did a lot of Hollywood scores there already for Hans Zimmer, Harry Gregson Williams, and all kinds of stuff. So
and you've been in the room on a couple of work days for these projects, right? Didn't I see a picture of you sitting in the control room?
Yes, sometimes I was there, of course.
A lot of these guys would give up a body part. He's like, yeah, I was there. Okay.
So, and of course, we're not only recording film music there, we are also recording our own samples there. And now with a different concept that hall has a decay of 1.8 seconds. So we're recording the ensembles in place like you would for a film score.
Right.
Or for any orchestral recording. So we're recording them in place and with the natural ambience of the hall. And this is why this new series of libraries is called the Synchron series. So there's synchron strings, synchron percussion, synchron effects strings. But we are also porting the old existing libraries to the ambience of the new hall electronically, right, with convolution. We sampled we sampled our own hall. Wow. And that's a application called Mir, Vienna Mir Pro. So with that application, that's kind of built into the sample player, and so you can use if you buy this, it's called the synchronized appassionata strings, for example. So if you buy the synchronized appassionata strings, you have the old samples, but they are ported to the new hall.
Can you listen to them in the original dryer form as well, or is everything ported over so it sounds like it was?
No, you can listen if you reduce the impulse responses, the dry wet, dry wet fader. So you can reduce that, and you can listen to it.
It's all become so awesome. I mean, it really is.
The possibilities are extreme. Yeah. In the meantime,
I want to go back to working in a studio, because there are all these things that you can do now that back in my day, you move the microphone closer or farther, you threw moving blankets on the floor, anything. So I want to show you guys a couple of pictures, and I believe that we'll be able to talk over this stuff. Let's find out. If we go silent, just look at the pictures. But the first thing I'm going to show you is actually, this is I think one of the most misunderstood things that causes people with sample libraries of all price points to make music that sounds eh. And it's because they don't understand the floor plan of an orchestra. So this is a bird's eye view shot from Synchron, the studio that Martin was just describing, but it's reversed 180 degrees. So everything you're seeing is actually a mirror image of what the real deal would be, but this is real. Okay, so, great, I'm able to talk over it. So, Martin brought me a little cheat sheet. So at the top of the shot, you can see the percussion setup. And the percussion is kind of a backline spread across a room typically. And Martin and I were talking about this before the show, that there are actually kind of two standard large orchestra formats. There's like an American version and a Russian version.
I think that's what they call it, yeah.
Okay. I mean, if they can get together and build a space station, you'd think they would be able to agree on which one of these floor plans works best in an orchestra. But okay, we're getting there. Maybe the Russians were meddling in the floor plan. That's a political joke. Sorry, I never get to use political humor and get away with it on the show. So you've got the percussion with the timpani is like dead center in the back, and then the other percussion that ranges throughout the whole back, if you look at it carefully. It's kind of small on our screen, but I know that it's bigger for you guys. And then in front of that, in front of the percussion on the left side in reality, which would be on your right side, are the French horns. The woodwinds are directly in front of the timps, and then the brass is on the other side. So for you guys, it would be the brass is on the right, and the French horns are on the left, with the woodwinds being right up the middle, or right there in the middle, in the back, in front of. You can see the timpani pretty clearly. So there you go. And then in the front. Oh, you've got microphone positions in there too. That's cool. So in the front for the strings, you've got on the far right is first violins. Then next to them, coming over, 20 degrees toward the left in your shot, would be the second violins, followed by violas, followed by the cellos, or celli, right?
Well,
cello.
in English, it's very often cellos.
I'm trying to be all European, okay? Look, I'm hanging out with a dude from Australia. Austria. I did that as a joke. I know he's from Austria. He says people often confuse the two. And the double basses are actually behind the cellos and next to the brass. So the double basses have to be careful because they're getting spit on. Well, actually, it's the violas and the cellos are getting the spit from the trombones all the time. But this is just me as a relative layperson saying that we hear stuff that comes into Taxi where somebody's trying to do a big, like a trailer piece. And it's like the composition is pretty good, but you go, something just doesn't sound right, doesn't feel right. And it's because they don't understand. They're working with a sample library and they're taking each section and going, where should I put that? Oh, I'll put that over here. Oh, let me put the double bass down the middle because that's where a bass guitar would go. And it ends up sounding convoluted. So my theory is that these instruments like to be heard in a stereo mix the way they would be heard in the room. And they feel better that way. It's more organic. Maybe the samples talk to each other and know. Anyway, so I wanted to see the floor plan. Because as you can see, it's impressive. Anything you want to add to what I've said, because you know more than I do, and plus I want to have another bite of Claudia's.
No, but I think there are two things to that. The one thing is if you listen to classical music or symphonic music, that is to say, because modern film scores are not classical; they're symphonic music.
Right.
So you're used to a special You're used to that sound, and if unconsciously, and if something is not right, you can't say why it isn't right if you're not an expert, but you say that it just doesn't fit or doesn't work. And the other thing is there's a reason why the orchestra is laid out the way it is, a historical reason how it all evolved.
Tell me more about that.
That's about the acoustics and about the loudness of the instruments, and of course the strings that are softer need to be in the front.
Right.
And you have 14 or 16 first violins and 10 or 12 second violins because they carry the melodies and stuff like that. So it's a very delicate, balanced thing. How many musicians are sitting where, and that evolved over like hundreds of years until we have that status we have right now, and that's why it's so balanced. So because of course then the horns are very loud, so they are in the background. The percussion sometimes is the loudest of them all. Think of a triangle or stuff like that. Right. So they're totally in the background. So that's and there were no microphones and no PA systems back when these footprints were designed. So it had to rely on the floor plan, the layout of the symphony combined with the acoustics of the hall. And this is the most important point. You don't have to, you can't look at the orchestra alone. You always have to think about the room. And this is why when mixing and using the room is an instrument itself. So you have to work with both entities, the orchestra and the room, to get to what you're looking for. Makes perfect sense. This is such like an awesome first date for me. I mean, I love this stuff. I could talk about this endlessly. Okay, so now
Let's see. Here's a shot. That's a shot, obviously not a bird's eye view of the room set up for recording. And I'm guessing that that's a full orchestra record. So that was probably for a scoring thing versus sample library building.
Exactly.
And you can see, gorgeous room. Anybody would want to work in that room. Okay, and this... when you get a VSL percussion library, that's what you're getting right there, folks. I mean, look at that.
Not yet, but we're starting. We're starting, yeah. But we have all this. It's all stored at Synchron Stage.
So Martin did actually say to me, I asked him, we were out to dinner, I don't know, 3-4 weeks ago or something, and I said, so Martin, one day can I come over and be there, and do a taxi TV from Synchron? He goes, yeah, we can make that happen. So I'm going to hold him to that.
It's going to be fun. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I mean, look at that room. I mean, it's just, and honestly, just my own personal preference. I look at that room and I just want to take like a Shep's stereo microphone, the kind that's got both capsules on the same axis, and rotate them. And just, I used to take a microphone like that, put it on a piece of twine, hang it from a ceiling in a room like that, and just lower it, and sit there and listen in stereo and go, there it is right there. Mm-hmm. When you hit the sweet spot and everything becomes magical. No compression is needed, no EQ is needed. It just sounds like it does in the room. And it's, to me, that's the greatest. So now, let's look at the control room, boys and girls. Look at that. Ow! Man, I could get lost in there. So, what kind of console is that, by the way?
That's a 96-channel SSL Duality.
Wow. That was probably like $5,000, right?
Yeah. It came with a discount.
Right, exactly, $5,000 a week. And funny enough, as I was looking through, Martin sent me a link to a bunch of these photos. I was looking through and I saw the captions on one of the photos said Dennis Sands. I went, that's got to be. So like 40 years ago when I was first starting out in the industry, there were two guys that owned a place here in Hollywood called Group 4 Recording, and Dennis Sands was one of the engineers. He was the main orchestral engineer and a partner in the studio, and we belonged to the same small organization called SPARS. And I knew him way back when, and then he became, as Martin confirmed, one of the top 3 scoring engineers probably in the world. And so there was a picture of my old buddy Dennis Sands sitting there in that room. Just gorgeous. Anyway, all right, back to the live shot. There we are. Okay, so that was as much technology as I've ever given you guys on an episode of Taxi. And there's the chat room. Hello again, everybody. Okay, so I'm going to check my notes real quick, see if there's anything I want to cover before we start playing you before and afters. Oh, something really important that I totally forgot to mention to you guys. Not only will Martin be at the Road Rally this year, but a company called Ilio, that is the U.S. distributor for all of VSL's products, will be at the Road Rally. They were a sponsor, I think, like 8 or 10 years ago. And they're coming back, and am I letting the cat out of the bag to say that there will be some product offered at some sort of discount?
Absolutely, yeah.
So that's exciting. So that's kind of why I wanted to do the show, is to wet your whistle a little bit and help you. For those of you who are thinking about getting into orchestral, or maybe you want to upgrade your library, Martin's going to teach 2 classes, a beginner class and an intermediate class. Can we talk about those for a minute and kind of talk about what you're going to cover in the beginning class?
Yeah.
He's got notes.
I need my notes too.
Yeah. I'm having strudel.
So yeah, there's in the basic class, we have to talk a little bit about technology, because when you understand how does it really work, computers, RAM, CPU, we touch things like Mac or Windows, because a lot of people have these questions. What do I need to get started? What does it work on a desktop or a laptop, or see what different sequencers.
Do you have an Android version?
No, not yet. So it's a little bit necessary to understand how, for example, sample streaming works, that you can make informed decisions what gear to get and which libraries and do the work on which computer and stuff like that.
Do you need like really top of the line stuff? Like, let's say you're a Mac person. I know that several of our most successful members have almost embarrassingly mid-range computers. You know, they have like a 5 or 6 year old iMac that's got 8 gigs of RAM. And like a 2.3 whatever hertz processor, you know, nothing exceptional, and yet they're able to make great sounding recordings. So the same is true for VSL, that you can have
absolutely
something that's not like a $5,000 iMac.
Absolutely. First of all, there are different products for different categories of musicians or composers.
Right.
So our entry level products, yeah. I mean, the example that I'm going to play, I do a lot on a lap. That's a 2012 MacBook Pro.
Okay.
With 16 gigabyte of RAM, but I can do a lot with that.
Wow.
And so you don't need what you need, for example, just as one example, if you use SSDs instead of hard drives, that's a huge advantage. And you can, you don't need that much RAM.
And tell them what an SSD is.
Okay, it's a solid state drive.
Right.
Which doesn't have any moving parts inside.
So you don't have to wait for it to spin up and find something on the drive.
Exactly. That's why it's so quickly. It's a kind of a flash drive.
Right.
It's a huge flash drive. And so the access time to the samples is much quicker. So, and this is, I don't want to go into detail here, but this is about RAM preload of samples and stuff like that, which is kind of necessary to make this all happen. And there are several tricks how you can use older computers or not so powerful computers and still create great mock-ups or demos.
So
pieces.
So that's kind of the basic class. So people who are just starting out should probably go to that one. And what are you going to offer in the? Is it intermediate or advanced that you're doing?
Well, I call it advanced. Well, the basic is about what you need. We talk about articulations. I'm still in the basic class. We talk about what do you need to know. The first things that you would like to apply when you're creating a melody, creating a accompaniment. So, yeah, basic stuff.
Okay.
In the advanced class, we'll look at how can I make a piece of music really make it alive. How can I breathe life into it? The phrasings, phrase shaping, use a lot of different articulations, tinker with the timing, with repetitions, with pitch. So there are so many parameters. What is volume, what is expression, what is velocity crossfading, which is all different things, and you use all this in combination to get to...
It sounds... I love it, but it sounds overwhelming. Like there's so much to learn that I'm afraid some people may never start. But from what I've been told by our members who have kind of crossed the chasm, is that it takes a while to get the basics down. But once you get the basics down, then you're so hungry to go farther that you can't learn the new stuff fast enough, and that the software has gotten so good that absolutely. Almost anything that they can imagine is already covered in the software. It's like stuff that used to be a chore, a real labor to make something happen. Now you just have to know, this is what I need. Oh, look at that. The software does it.
Right.
That's exciting to me. So at the Road Rally, when you teach these two classes, will there be any times where you'll hang out at the Ilio booth so that you can answer questions? Because I know that people are going to go to the class, and people are often shy in a class. They don't want to raise their hand, and you know, maybe they're a little shy because they don't want to look like they don't know what they're talking about yet or whatever. So they'll want a little one-on-one time with you.
Yeah,
so.
I'll be at the Ilio table. I'll be at the bar. So.
Okay, well, you know what? They will be at the bar. I know this crew, the people watching Taxi TV, will definitely be at the bar. That's all these guys do is drink during the show. You know, I should probably be getting kickbacks from the liquor distributors. Okay, so that's. I'm so excited, and I'm really grateful that you got me back together with Mark Hiskey, who's the CEO of Ilio. He's a very smart, very understated guy. He's really cool, and you wouldn't know how much he knows because he's not a braggy kind of guy.
No,
you know?
Absolutely not. But,
yeah,
but he's great. Yeah,
he is. He's very,
and he's been running the company for 20 years now.
Wow,
together with his wife Shelley.
Right. So I'm really excited to have them back. I really am. Okay, we've covered that. Oh, one more thing. Not really a sales plug, but I don't want people to be intimidated by what they think is, oh, I can't get that because it's $3,000. And I actually thought, because VSL has such a reputation for being, you know, kind of a Rolls-Royce product, that I thought that it would be priced above beginners, and you made me aware that you guys have libraries that are a few $100, right?
Exactly. Yes.
What's like the entry level starter?
Well, there are two packages. One is called the Vienna Special Editions, that you can start with something around $300 or $300, and of course there will be, especially on these products, special pricing at the Taxi Road Rally, and you can expand within the special edition family of products to add a little bit.
Okay.
And there's also upgrade prices to the large products. But then just actually 2 weeks ago, we released a new product, the Vienna Smart Orchestra. And that's currently for $175.
Wow.
It's the entire orchestra laid out over the keyboard. So it's a different product. It's not a typical sample library.
Right.
It's a product for sketching, for live playing, and for creating quick pieces, because the entire orchestra is on the entire keyboard.
So is that something that might be a good entry-level product for people who've dreamed about doing orchestral, or is that going to be like training wheel? Should an experienced user that wants a sketchpad get it, or should an inexperienced person get it as a gateway?
If you're an inexperienced user and you take the Vienna Smart Orchestra, then you can really fake it really good.
Okay.
Because you just play those chords and it works.
Wow.
If
you just sold 100 of them.
If you really want to get into virtual orchestration and learn more, then you should start with something like the special editions, because then you have all the instruments separately, and that's a lot of, how shall I put this? A lot of demos or orchestral markups don't sound right because the people who created them didn't create the tracks of each instrument separately. So they played the strings like a keyboard player.
Right.
Which quickly sounds like playing an organ. An
example that I had in my notes was, I've heard stuff where people would take like a violin sample and just go down as low as they could go on the violin because they didn't want to take the time to create a viola. And it just didn't sound right because it was the wrong key for the wrong instrument, you know. So
what I'm about to say is that if you really want to learn orchestral instrumentation, and you should play your first violins, your second violins, your violas, your cellos, your basses separately, and everything should be a kind of a nice melody in itself.
Okay.
Then you get a real nice string ensemble. If you play the entire orchestra like on a keyboard, then it quickly sounds not so right and like an organ. But the Vienna Smart Orchestra overcomes this a little bit because it was specifically created for playing everything on the keyboard, and so you can it works great for not for everything, but if you want to have quick results, and it depends. But
let's face it, anybody who buys anything, none of us read the full manual. We all go to the quick start guide, right? So this is VSL's answer to the quick start guide for orchestral music creation.
Vienna Smart Orchestra is extremely quick. You just bring it up and play it, and it sounds great.
Wow, that's going to be very, very popular at the Road Rally. Wow. I didn't even know that was coming, and I'm excited about that. So can you play some of your before, are you set up to play any of your own personal pieces? Can you play another piece that you like? Or do you want me to play it? What's not one of the before and afters, but what was the something with elves? Dances with Elves?
Dances with Elves, yeah.
I thought that piece was brilliant. Would you mind playing it?
Okay. Let me see. I wasn't
I don't
prepared, but I should have it here somewhere.
I probably still have it on my hard drive. If it's a pain in the butt to find it, I can probably.
Here it is.
I love that piece. The minute I heard that one, the night before before last year's rally when I first discovered you, I remember thinking the title was perfect. You could absolutely hear that piece. I mean, that could have been score in the movie Elves or Elf. It could have been. I mean, it's Santa's Workshop. I think. No.
I see some funny commercials.
Really, with elves?
Yeah.
To me, I mean, there's nothing really Christmassy about it, but elves working in the workshop. Anyway, I loved it, and they were trying to give it a genre, and somebody said that it was like I think it was Paul Croteau said, oh man, I lost it now, but like light orchestral dramedy music, and it was great. Anyway, so okay, now we're gonna do before and after, so that you can hear stuff.
Just quick. Someone asked, yeah, that was a real violin, and the rest was woodwinds from the Vienna Symphonic Library.
So there you go. All right, so tell them what you're gonna do now with the other stuff.
So, yeah, Michael asked me to prepare something. How does a piece created with sample libraries sound when you don't really tweak it, just the normal samples when you compose it, and how does it sound when you really tweak the phrasing and the timing and use different articulations and stuff like that. So yesterday I put this together, and I'm going to use, this is what you hear is this 30 seconds is now what I'm playing today, and I'm going to use the full-blown version of that at the road rally. So I still have to do that. I will extend this, and add more instruments and add more things, and I will throw in all the things that we're going to talk about, all the tips and tricks, like what you can do to improve everything. I'm going to throw everything into this piece.
So rather than just talking about it, you can talk about it. So here's what it sounds like.
That we have examples, and that's going to be the extended version of that, what I'm going to play. So now this is, we play the untreated version first? Mm-hmm. Okay, so here goes.
Okay. That was the world's longest bow. That was the 12-foot bow right there.
Yeah, this is exactly the problem, or the thing. There are no static tones in symphonic music.
Oh, that's right.
There is always some change. More vibrato, less vibrato. The crescendo, decrescendo. There is always something going on. Even if players are try to play a static note, they don't.
Right, there's still going to be the human body involved in it.
Right,
yeah.
And so that's the main, exactly, yeah, and that's the main thing. Why there is so much work involved when you really want, because you can't have these imperfections. If you have these imperfections in every single sample, it wouldn't work, because you have crappy samples, and the mistake shows up every time you play that sample. It has the same mistake in there.
So it's compounded crap.
Yeah. So you have to create perfect samples, and change them and tweak them and make them imperfect after the fact.
Okay. And how do you know where to draw the line on that imperfection? Because too much of a good thing can be too much of a good thing. So that's just ear training by listening to more of this music.
By listening to symphonic music, of course, is the key to everything, because you need to have a vision, an idea in your head where you want to go, and if that, of course, sample libraries help you, because you can try it out. Right. Does it sound okay? I'll do this. Does it sound real? Not really. Let me try something else. I do this myself too. Sometimes I use articulations that are not really meant for this piece now, but it sounds right, because this passage needs something else.
Like a miniature version of your grandfather sitting on your shoulder going,
absolutely,
Martin, no, that is not right.
No, but when I compose, he's there.
Awesome. Okay, so now let's hear the so-called treated version.
This is how it should really sound like. Maybe I'm sitting in front of the microphone here. Maybe the sound.
I don't know. They were commenting, saying that it sounded really good.
Okay.
Okay, now can you play quickly back to back, untreated, then treated? So this is untreated.
The treated version starts more piano and builds, evolves. For example, let's listen to the first violins here. And the other version sounds like this. Tone just goes on.
The
like
samples
this.
are so
Yeah.
good that you can almost get away with it. But yeah, you know, it's pretty obvious.
Or if you do, like, you heard that one portamento?
Yeah.
If you throw in a portamento every now and then,
Right.
so that
it trains or tricks the.
that it sounds very real.
Yeah.
And you can't do it all the time because then it sounds crazy. Nobody does wah 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 all the time. But if you use it when it's kind of authentic, when it's appropriate, then it works.
Wow.
Yeah.
What else?
What else? We can see the screen now. You would see how the articulations are changing. So I'm using different versions of legato, slower, slurs. Sorry. That's my...
As Claudia, did you guys like the strudel?
Yes, we did. So I'm using different legato versions. Sometimes it sustains, sometimes legatos, and then of course, like I said, I'm using in this piece two ways of controlling volume. That one thing is expression, and the other thing is velocity crossfade.
Okay. What about bowing technique? That's something that here, scoot back in so we can both be in the shot. Bowing, before it was pretty obvious, the super long, sustained note that was a bow longer than anybody would ever play with. How does somebody who's starting out and doesn't know orchestral music, I mean, bowing is a whole part of your education as a string player, I mean, how do they know?
Yeah, I don't think it's that complicated. I think when you start out and you have two categories of notes, the short notes and the long notes.
Okay, that sounds like an oversimplification, but I'll buy it.
Very easy. And then you can, you think of, does the note, like wind instruments or any other, actually, like a synthesizer, is there an attack on that note, or is there no attack? So is there a nice swell? Does it come in easily and softly, or does it really has a strong attack? And I think these are the only things that you need to start and you need to know in the beginning. Is this like the staccatos that are the short notes that are played in this piece? These, the louder you play them, the harsher they get. That's the built-in thing. The higher the velocity, the harsher they get in the library. The library does that for you.
Okay, and that's what would happen in real life.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. And okay.
And and you have to think in an arc. So in a like da 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 da. You hear when you sing it. Singing is a very useful tool to listen to what you want to do.
Okay.
Because if you sing that phrase da 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 da, you realize, okay, I have maybe there's an attack on the first note, but on the other notes are slurred. So they're easily transitioning from one note to the other. And then you create, with the velocities of volume, you create this arc. So sing it,
Right.
and you get an idea what you want to do.
How is it working with brass and woodwinds? You're obviously a string player. You've spent a lot of time playing in orchestras. For somebody who now conquers strings and they've got all the articulations, all the dynamics, everything figured out, should they tackle each one of the disciplines within the orchestra like in a sequence, or can they try and learn them all at the same time? If they're working on strings one day, go, oh, I wonder how that would work with brass, and try it, or should they master one and move on to the next?
It's partly very similar, because you have the same principles, like this, like I said, with attacks and the flow and an arc and stuff like that. That's valid for every instrument.
And the dynamics as well. The harder
Right.
you blow,
Yeah.
it's almost like the Fletcher-Munson curve in engineering. You know, louder it is, the more, what's the word I'm looking for? The better it sounds. It seems overwhelming to me, but obviously millions of people have mastered this, so it's not overwhelming.
Absolutely.
Don't let me scare you. And what's the product again that makes it good for people like me? For
The Vienna Smart Orchestra.
Okay, for like Dumb and Dumber guys, the Vienna Smart Orchestra. Awesome. Let's. I'm gonna ask Martin one more question, but if you guys want to start asking questions, because we've got a half an hour to. Okay, so Bria's got questions, so let's take some questions.
Okay, first question, Fantamulonis asks, Martin, if you had to give one tip for getting a better brass sound and or mixing with strings, what would it be?
All right, so I'm going to repeat the question because she's obviously 4 feet away from the microphone on the backside. So Fantamulonis wanted to know, if you want to get a better brass sound, what was the...
If you what's a tip for getting a better brass sound and or mixing with strings?
Okay, what's a good tip for getting a better brass sound in the virtual world?
Depends on what you already have. There are several sample libraries out there, from Spitfire, from East West, from Berlin Brass, whatever. You can. It's hard to say what tip I could give you. The Vienna special editions that I mentioned, they're also available in sections. So you could also get the strings only, or the brass special editions, or the woodwind special editions separately. So I don't know the price of that. It's like maybe $120, $130 for a brass library like this.
So you can just run that solo. You don't need it to, if you've already got strings and all the other elements of an orchestra, but you don't like the brass that came with that.
Yeah, you can.
Library.
You
can
can exchange it, and you must. But you should take care of the environment. If you have a library, for example, that was recorded in a concert hall or on a scoring stage, then the ambience is kind of baked into the samples. So if you're getting like the special edition brass sections, then you would need something, for example, it's called MirX. That's a little convolution plugin inside the Vienna Instruments player that puts the brass section in a scoring stage or in a concert hall as well. So when you're mixing different libraries, you have to take care of the room, that it matches somehow.
It's mind-blowing to me that can even be done.
That's what's happening all the time, yeah.
I come from a world, a Lexicon 224 was like my first digital reverb, and that thing blew my mind. And prior to that, I was using live chambers, where we literally had like a Bose speaker on the floor and a microphone on a pulley in the ceiling, and we would throw moving blankets on the floor to shorten up the decay time, bring the mic down to get more of the speaker, less of the room, raise it up to get more of the room. And the fact that you can do this now, that there's software that actually figures out, that sounds like that was done in a 3,000 seat concert hall, and will mimic that for you. Figure it out and mimic it. You don't have to sit there and
you have to, unfortunately, you have to know a bit about the hall where the one there. I don't think there is a piece of software that analyzes the kind of reverb tail and applies it to something else.
Okay. Well, then I'm really disappointed. Because on the box it'd have to have a little picture of me bending over, moving blankets. And the next question is?
Shaftree's Publishing asks, can Martin explain when he says articulation, what controllers, example expression, modulation, etc., is he using, and how does he enter the values?
Okay,
so do you want to repeat back the question?
Yeah, the question is the different, what's articulations and what was it, modulation, and the different controls, continuous controllers, and how do I add this and work with this. Well, with Vienna instruments especially, you have several ways of switching between articulations. Most of the time I use key switches. So in the Vienna instruments there's a matrix like a chess board with all the articulations in there, and you can move in this matrix with two sets of key switches, one for horizontal, one for vertical movements. So you're moving through this grid and access the articulations. And I use continuous controllers, like I have a little fader box with CC7 for volume, CC11 for expression, CC2 which is actually breath controller for velocity crossfade. Then I have tons of others for more or less attack, for more or less release, for pitch. So for something very specific, slot crossfade in Vienna instruments. So these are all little parameters that you can change so that to bring life into this. Sometimes I'm using a breath controller, which is a nice way to shape the phrasings.
So for somebody that's never done it before, what's kind of the first step in learning how to add these things? I mean, it's great that you can control them. It's great that there are all these possibilities. So now let's assume that somebody's learned, pick one, one of the parameters. How do they know where to put that parameter, and so they can use them? I'm looking at the matrix on his laptop as I'm talking to you. So they've got the note. The note is highlighted on a MIDI keyboard, I'm assuming, because you're
the articulation for the key switches.
Yeah. So you're how do you know which one to put where?
Good question. If you start with the Vienna Special Editions, it only has 5 or 6 articulations for the strings, for example.
So basically,
it's just staccatos, détachés, sustains, legatos, tremolos, pizzicatos. I think that's it. So you have something to work with. I'll play some examples at the Road Rally that are just done with the Special Editions, and it's very impressive how far you can get just with that. And I'll if you start just as I said, the short notes are very easy to use, because the harder you hit the key, the louder the note gets. That's a straightforward thing. So the long notes, you change the expression or the volume of the long notes most of the time with velocity crossfade. Maybe I should explain what velocity crossfade really is.
Yes.
I would want to do that at the Road Rally, but since we're talking so much about
Give them
this,
a little tease.
So an instrument, if you want to make an instrument louder, you can, and you just raise the volume, you have the same sound, just louder. But a flute or a violin or any instrument changes the sound. The louder you play, the harsher or the brighter or whatever. So
more
the sound,
strident it becomes, right?
the sound changes. So when you're sampling instrument, you're sampling the pianissimo tones, the piano, the mezzo forte, the fortissimo sounds. You sample all these different, and this is called velocity layers.
Okay.
You sample these different velocities.
Do you ever send the band home and go, "Oh crap, we forgot a layer"?
I don't know if that happened. It's a very industrialized process, actually.
Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to pull you out of the question.
And so when you're using velocity crossfade in the sample player, the player plays every velocity at the same time, even if you don't hear it. So, like, let's say there are 4 velocity layers from pianissimo to fortissimo, and you hit the note, the note on the keyboard, and all these 4 velocity players are playing at the same time, but you're only hearing the pianissimo layer.
Okay.
And then you're moving the mod wheel, for example, and move it up, and the player switches and blends. That's the crossfade. Crossfades to the next layer and to the next layer until you're at the fortissimo samples. So that way you're moving and crossfading through the various velocity layers. So when you start a note very, very softly, and you're getting louder and louder and louder, you're moving through those velocity layers using, for example, the mod wheel.
Okay, that makes sense.
That's what you start to use when you have long notes, and that's the most important thing. As I said, no static notes.
Right.
Shape your notes, and that's...
You are going to be so incredibly popular at the Road Rally this year. You are. Okay, Bria, hit us with another. No, do it now.
Brad Rosenborough asks, I heard that it's a good thing to use 2 or 3 different libraries in a single piece to make the strings and brass sound more believable. What do you think of that?
I've heard that as well, and the question is, Brad Roseborough said, I've heard that people mix different libraries to make the sound more authentic. Do you subscribe to that notion?
Well, of course, every library has different advantages or
strengths or weaknesses.
Strengths or weaknesses, exactly. So people are using a lot of different libraries and mix them to use what they like about this library and what they like about the other library. Or maybe this one is easier for staccatos and sounds great, and the other library has maybe some pitch problems with certain samples, so you're switching to another library. So of course people are always, especially for strings, people are always using the new, or want to get the better libraries, the more advanced, the more evolved libraries, and that's a constant battle kind of to get better and get the better gear and get the better software and the better samples.
Are there libraries that actually are relatively expensive libraries, and there are some aspects of them that just are surprisingly poorly executed, and you sit there and go, how could this be, an $800 library and have, a trumpet sound that sounds like a Casio keyboard from 1985?
No, well, I think the libraries that are on the market right now are all pretty. There's like very, a baseline. Very good, and the quality has improved, of course, over the last 10 years, 15 years, so, or even in the last 5 years. There's so many different libraries and specialized libraries also coming out, focusing on more on textures or more on hybrid or soundscapes or whatever.
I don't know if you saw the episode. About a year ago, I did an episode with one of our members that owns a library called Warp 4 Technologies. And he's just a passionate man that is very anal retentive in the best possible way. I mean that as a compliment. And he spent so much time, got great players, and made this incredible sounding brass library that... Yeah, I've got to play it for you. I'll introduce you to him at the Road Rally. It's just a work of art because it's one man's passion concentrated on this one thing, and you would appreciate it. Okay, next question.
Oh. Go back. I'm getting a lot. Mark Smerden asks, is the VSL that I got with Contact the same product from VSL itself?
So the samples, the free samples in Contact is a subset of what you're getting with the special editions. So it's extracted from and so it's a fraction of what's included with the special edition. But it's the same. It's a very basic stuff, but that's the same.
Okay, so it's like the baby version of Microsoft
kind of.
Word.
Yeah, right.
All right, right. The version that comes in Office, but not. Yeah. Okay. Next question.
Lamar Franklin asks, do you ever chart your compositions and then record each part separately?
No, I don't. Most of the composers I know don't do this because it's quicker just to get to the DAW and start composing and playing in everything really quick. I sometimes when I'm hiking or under the shower, which is a great place to compose really, then I take quick notes, quick sketches, or sing it into my iPhone. But I don't compose a score on paper.
I hope you have a waterproof iPhone. Okay, and another question, please.
Mike Evans one asks, on most libraries and special editions too, you don't get long notes with a fast attack, like an accent. And you have to layer a staccato sample on top, but it never sounds natural. Why?
I do that all the time. I layer staccatos with long notes a lot, and maybe you overdo it. Maybe you should reduce the attack a bit, that it just adds a little bit of a little more attack to that long note, but not too much. So you have to adjust it, and you have to play with it.
All things done in moderation.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, because otherwise it would be obvious what it was.
Yeah.
Even I would hear that. Okay.
Okay. Mark Smerden again asks, is a composition program like Sibelius a good place to start? I have created many Sibelius scores that could do with this sort of treatment.
Yes, it works. I've never worked with notation programs. Usually sequencers or DAWs, like from Logic, Cubase, Pro Tools, Digital Performer, you have more options to tweak the samples or the lines or everything. It's not so easy with a notation program, but I really can't tell because I never used Sibelius. People tell me it's easier with a DAW.
One of the people just asked, what's your DAW, your personal choice of DAW?
Logic and Cubase. I've been a Logic user for like a really long time, and then I switched to Cubase for various reasons, and then now I'm using kind of both.
You know, I'm so old, and I've been in the industry for so long that back in the day, a DAW wasn't called a DAW. It was called a digital audio workstation, and people would call it a workstation, not a DAW. And when people started using the term DAW, I kept going, why are they always talking about dogs? You know how sometimes you just hear something wrong? I really thought they were talking about dogs, and then I realized they weren't. Okay.
Jean Alley asks, do you EQ your samples?
Yes.
Really? I'm really curious about that because the stuff sounds so good and such care is taken in the recording. Why would you need to? And what are you mostly just looking for more definition? Are you looking for more top end?
Yeah, that depends. That really depends on the piece you're, and it's I rarely do like have a template with my EQ settings. I couldn't use them at the next piece because it's totally different.
Different octave, different everything, right?
Different maybe maybe you have some staccatos and they are very harsh, and you want to take a little bit off of this harshness, or you have one note that sticks out all the time. So maybe you automate your EQ or use it. I use the dynamic EQs a lot. So when you're creating that cohesive sound of the entire orchestra playing in the room, sometimes you want to EQ just a reverb channel because in the room there is something too much low end or stuff. So yeah, I'm using EQs all the time, and there's always something that's kind of a little bit of disturbing, or some frequencies that you want to pull out, or other ones that you want to emphasize. Yes.
I remember doing an orchestral date at a really big church in Fort Lauderdale once, and I kept hearing this hum, hum sound. Finally figured out, I thought it was some sort of anomaly in the room, some sort of standing wave in the room. It was the timpani.
Oh, yeah.
They were just resonating with something else. I think probably with a double bass, and giving every time the double bass player would hit a certain note, you get. Next question.
Yeah. Doesn't happen with samples.
Right.
Dan Weber asks, are the VSL round robins random or sequential?
They are sequential, and with the Vienna Instruments player, with the paid pro player, you even have access to all the single repetitions, and you can if for example there are 8 repetitions and number 6 is really disturbing, you can just take it out.
Want another one?
Oh yeah, keep them coming.
Audio Doodle asks, when playing a long phrase, how do you know when to change the bow direction, and how do you do it smoothly?
Okay, I don't do it. With samples, I don't care. Vienna Symphonic Library, for example, doesn't specify bow direction. It's a feature that some libraries have. I made the experience that you don't really, it's not necessary to take care of bow direction, because you're phrasing, you have this phrase in your head and you want to make it sound like you have it in your head, and you create with the library, you create that arc. And it's like in with a real orchestra, as long as you're not the orchestrator who puts in the markings for bowing and the slurs and everything, very often the great musicians figure it out themselves. So in an orchestra, of course they tell you this is a slurred bow and this is a slurred. This isn't. These notes are connected, and I do this here, but I don't think in terms of changing a bow. I think in terms of the arc of the phrase.
Right, that makes sense.
I don't care much about
especially because you're a real player.
And if
well, you know what I mean.
But if I do this staccato, for example, in this piece, a good player should play. A good violin player should play these as similar as possible. You shouldn't hear this is an upstroke and this is a downstroke.
Interesting. This is very educational. We should be charging you money for this.
And the last one I've got here is Greg Vaughn asks, what's the best EQ for cellos?
I can't answer it. The
I
best
can.
EQ settings or EQ the brand or the manufacturer.
Let's go. I think he's looking for best frequency.
No, I have no idea.
And
there is no best.
Right. It's context.
There is no answer to this, because that depends. How is the cello recorded? Is it recorded in a concert hall, in a small studio? Is it a sample? Does the sample have a lot of low end or not? So there's absolutely no answer to.
Yeah, what octave
EQ,
are you playing, and where on the neck
Exactly.
is it being played? What kind of bow? Literally, all those things are a factor.
Yeah.
here's a tip that has nothing to do with what we're talking about today, except for the fact that I've had this experience. Somebody in New York, when I lived and worked there, taught me this trick, and it worked really, really well, which is for recording a cello. Take a lavalier microphone. I used to use a Sony lavalier, but I'm guessing almost any good lavalier would work. And take some foam, just regular old foam, and wrap it around the microphone a little bit, and then stick it in the F-hole. And 9 out of 10 times, that will sound better than putting a $3,000 mic 3 feet away from the cello.
Wow.
It's just one of those weird things. I've also found that using a lavalier mic on the high end of a piano versus like a Neumann 87 or a Fork 14 or something, lavalier mics, well, inherently have a peak around, probably 2,500 to 3K, so that it grabs the voice more, and that just, it sounds really good on a cello. Okay. So there you go. So Dennis Sands, if you're watching the show today, you're welcome.
Oh, that was him.
Yeah, he's probably the one that taught me. All right, let's see. We still got 4 minutes left.
I've got a couple more.
Oh, Bria's got 2 more. All right.
Yeah. Ken DePotter asks, how do you handle tempo for a big orchestrated piece like Across the Valley? Do you adjust tempo section by section or measure by measure?
I'm not sure if I understand. Measure by tempo. Well, and the tempo in by this piece, this is a piece that that doesn't have tempo changes. So it's
right.
This is
you created for a cue.
If you create for a cue, you should use the same tempo so that they can edit. And
do you remember the night that I called you and said, I'm blown away by this piece? How did you learn how to create something like this? And his answer was, through Taxi, of course. I was so flattered because you know what? That's how we're going to close out the show today. Is I'll play Across the Valley one more time so that people can check it out. You've taken rather than scoring a whole movie, you created all these sections that each have a little different attitude, a little different texture, a little different feel, but you're on the same motif throughout, you're on the same tempo throughout, and an editor could take any one of those pieces and use it as a starting point, and that's really part of the definition of a cue, is it's one thing. And I mean, other than the huge dramatic ending, which obviously you'd have a hard time starting the piece with that. But it's just, I think, beautifully executed.
Thank you.
All right, with that, I want to remind you guys, first of all, I totally forgot this, and Bria was kicking me under the table throughout the entire episode. Subscribe, like us, share it. That one doesn't show up very well. And that little bell thing over there, yeah, wherever it is, the bell.
It's next to the subscribe button.
Yeah, click the bell next to the subscribe button. That way you get alerts when really cool stuff is happening, like this show. So don't forget, the Taxi Road Rally registration is Thursday night, November 1st. That's when you get your badge and everything. And the open mics start that night, and then the panels start on Friday the 2nd. And don't forget, we're starting out this year's Road Rally with an incredible teacher, Laurel Ostrander, who's a really talented video editor, did a thing last year that just blew away everybody who was smart enough to be in the room for that. So I'm bringing her back to have her start the entire Road Rally out. And if you ever had the dream of kicking everybody else's butt with your instrumental cues, particularly for reality TV, although this isn't limited to just that, but it would be largely helpful in that area. Don't come late. Be in the room at 9 o'clock sharp on Friday morning, November 2nd, because you're going to be blown away by her. I will be publishing the schedule. It's essentially done. There are just a few people. It's like, I can't make that time, so I'm doing the final adjustment of moving things around. But hopefully by the end of this week, I'm pretty sure by the end of this week, I will have the full schedule posted.
Someone is asking if Martin's going to be at the Eat and Greet.
Would you want to do that? You know, at we used to call mentor lunches.
Yeah.
Would you
Sure.
be this year? They're called industry eat and greet because the mentor lunch is getting confused with one-to-one mentors. Would you be available to mentor at the eat and greet?
If you would like me to do this, yes.
I would like you to do that. That would be awesome. Can you please make a note to talk to Angel about that, because I actually think she had a seat that she had to fill, so that would be great. Okay, with that, Martin, thank you, man.
Thanks for having me. It was really fun. Thanks so much.
We've become friends over the last year. We've gone out to dinner 2 or 3 times. I don't know. I just really enjoy this guy because he's got so much in his head, and he's so humble and so awesome.
Thank you.
You are. You're like a supermodel that doesn't realize she's pretty. That's what you're like.
I never heard this before.
Oh, no, but you know what he did here? And I actually had this in my notes and I forgot to bring it up. So we're out to dinner a couple of weeks ago. I don't know, maybe a month ago. And the waitress says, "You have really nice hair." Which he does, I guess. But, you know, and I thought, wow, in today's climate, if a male waiter said that to a female diner, there would probably be a lawsuit involved. But Martin took it in stride. He wasn't offended, and we just enjoyed our meal. All right. So with that, where is that piece? Okay. Hopefully I'll be able to get this to start. And here we go. Across the Valley. And we go from the sublime to the ridiculous. See you guys next week for another exciting episode of Taxi TV Live. Bye, you guys. Thanks again, Martin.
Thank you.